Newstalk, KGVO, AM 1290 and 101.5 FM.
You're listening to Montana Morning with Peter Christian.
A plainsman wanted for a federal standoff is arrested in Washington State. Good morning, everyone. It's Montana Morning. It's Thursday, April 7th, 2016. Skies mostly clear. We've got 37 degrees in Missoula right now, and our newscast is sponsored by Bulls Eyewear. They offer some of the lowest prices in town on contact lenses. See Lynette at Bulls Eyewear, 2910 South Reserve. 27-year-old Jake Ryan of Plains was taken into federal custody Monday after being arrested by Clark County Sheriff's deputies in a shed in Yacolt, Washington State. NBC Montana reports Ryan was one of 26 in a list of individuals facing federal charges over the 41-day armed occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. Ryan was found Monday morning on a 100-acre property in an area of Washington deputies described as almost wilderness. Ryan was booked in Clark County briefly before being taken to Portland, where he was taken into custody by the FBI. He appeared in federal court in Portland yesterday, where he entered not guilty pleas to his charges. 29-year-old Jordan Scott Barr appeared in Missoula Justice Court earlier this week on a charge of sexual intercourse without consent. Barr was apprehended in Minnesota and extradited back to Missoula to face the charges. Missoula County Attorney Kirsten Papps described how Barr was apprehended.
It's interesting how he got caught. He had asked his boss in Minnesota where he worked. He was on campus there and asked for some time off and wouldn't explain to her why he wanted this extended time off and kind of raised some red flags for her. She went and Googled him and found out that he had the warrant for him and turned him in.
Chief Deputy Missoula County Attorney Jason Marks described what happened when Barr appeared in Justice Court.
He appeared at liberty with his attorney after having posted the bond on the warrant, and he was seen by the judge who set conditions of release, which included the fact that if he leaves to return to Minnesota, he has to be on GPS monitoring.
Marks said Barr will have to appear in person in Missoula District Court at a date yet to be determined to face trial. If he's found guilty of felony sexual intercourse without consent, he could face up to 100 years in prison and up to a $50,000 fine. Questions over the Historic Preservation Commission's ability to fairly consider a demolition permit for the Missoula Mercantile continues to linger this week. In an email obtained by the Missoula Current, or KGVO news partner, the Commission's chairman, Steve Adler, is named as the architect working with a potential rival developer looking to repurpose the building and place condominiums on the second floor. Several other members of the commission have been actively pushing a petition on the Save the Merc Facebook page in an effort to stop Home Base from building its $30 million downtown hotel on the site. Home Base told the Current that it questions whether it can get a fair hearing before the city's Historic Preservation Commission next week. Missoula Justice of the Peace Karen Orzak announced yesterday she's planning to retire in early July. Orzak has spent the last 17 years as a Justice of the Peace, presiding over Missoula Justice Court, usually the first place a defendant sees as they enter the judicial system. She said there are times when the job can be difficult, especially when dealing with serious crimes.
Reviewing those affidavits of those heinous crimes, very difficult, but it's part of my job to put my emotions aside and do my job. But I think, sometimes I may be a victim of, secondary post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Orzak reflected on her nearly 2 decades on the bench.
It really has been an honor to do this job. I have enjoyed it so much. I believe that my actions have made a difference in other people's lives so that they can get on a better path.
Orzak said that she plans to travel and teach in her retirement. She said she specifically chose to retire in July so that her replacement will be able to run for office in the November general election. Montana officials are inviting PayPal to consider Montana for its new operations center after the online payment company canceled expansion plans in North Carolina. In a letter sent yesterday, Governor Steve Bullock and U.S. Senator John Tester invited the company to consider bringing the 400 jobs to Montana that have been planned for the Tar Heel state. Bullock spokesman Tim Crow said the invitation is serious and state officials are prepared to discuss financial incentives. What happened? Well, on Tuesday, PayPal scuttled its $3.6 million plan for the North Carolina Center because of a new state law that restricts protections for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. The company said its decision reflected its belief that all people should be treated equally. Montana Senator Steve Daines spoke in an appropriations subcommittee to discuss the Forest Service's fiscal year 2017 budget. Daines is pleased with the progress of the 2014 Farm Bill, but he voiced his concern it's not being completed at an adequate pace.
We've identified in Montana about 5 million acres with dead or dying trees, and that's something we've been communicating to Montanans back home, is that these are dead and dying trees. 5 million acres. You take 6,200 acres of projects have been identified so far. Do the quick math. It's about 0.1% is currently on the slate to address dead and dying trees, which of course present a wildfire risk.
Daines also pressed the Forest Service to prioritize tribal forestry projects.
The Tribal Forest Protection Act of 2004 authorized the Forest Service to prioritize tribal forestry projects in Forest Service and BLM land to protect these neighboring Indian trust resources from wildfire disease and threats originating on nearby federal lands. Unfortunately, in more than a decade, only 6 projects have been carried out in 10 years.
The U.S. Forest Service Chief Tom Tidwell said there will be 6 more projects this year alone, which will double their previous efforts. According to Daines, that's a much better trend line. A legislative panel will not recommend any changes to a Montana law protecting school athletes against concussions. The Education and Local Government Interim Committee had discussed expanding the law to cover community youth sports and other non-school athletics, but members decided Wednesday against amending rules enacted 3 years ago to protect student athletes from brain injuries caused by collisions and other severe blows. Since the law's passage, there have been discussions about protecting more children by including a community youth soccer group, small fry football, and club sports. A U of M study says about a third of youth sports groups do not have concussion policies in place. They're not required to do so under the current law. Despite the warm, relatively dry winter and the early spring that western Montana has experienced, Ray Nicholas, chief hydrologist with the National Weather Service in Missoula, said there's plenty of snowpack in area mountains.
There's a few spots that aren't doing as well with their snowpack, like over Lookout Pass area, never did really build up a normal snowpack. But most other locations, the Bitterroot, the Clark Fork, the Flathead, the Kootenai, all are in that about average range.
Nicholas said the El Nino pattern that's been dominating the weather will be ending, giving way to a possible La Nina winter.
There's been some talk of it actually going the reverse towards cooler sea surface temperatures into what we call a La Nina. If that takes place, that would be a good news for our snowpacks in the mountains. We typically seem to see more snow in the mountains when we get into La Nina patterns.
He said the severity of the upcoming fire season all depends on the weather, if the weather is hot and dry or cool and wet. Our News Talk time now, 6:12.
Newstalk, KGVO.
Missoula's official weather station.
Solid sunshine and comfortable temperatures today with our highs in the mid to low 70s. Friday will be the warmest day of the week as we top out at 80 degrees. We'll bring in a chance of showers by late Saturday into Sunday. I'm meteorologist Brooke Foster for KECI 13.